Well, good morning. It's
Good
great to
morning.
see you, Mayor Price.
It's great to be here. Great to be out and about.
It feels like it's been a long time since I've gotten to see you in person, so it's very nice to be able to be face and eyeball to eyeball
I know
with you.
it is nice. You know me, I'm a real people person, and that's been the hardest part of this whole pandemic, is not being able to see people and hug them and things. But we're going to get back to it. We're, I think we're at the top of this, and we'll begin to come down as vaccines get more prevalent.
The vaccine is very exciting, and we're looking forward to getting back to being able to be with each other and have our businesses back open again soon, too.
Indeed, particularly the piece about reopening businesses is critical. It's going to be very important to this city going forward.
Definitely. Well, it's part of what we're here to talk about today, the Womenworth meeting, and we're really excited to be able to talk to you, and we'll be having discussions with many other ladies later on to really get into some of the things that we might experience that might be different on a professional level.
Sure.
And so we'll get a little chance to hear about some of the things that you've experienced personally throughout your career. But I would love to start with just really about your job. You know, so many people think they know what it means to be a mayor of one of the largest cities in America, but maybe you can share give us a little insight of things that people might be surprised to learn about.
Well, being mayor is the greatest honor I've ever had, and the longest serving mayor Fort Worth has had. I've been there 10 years, and it truly is an honor, and I always laugh and say I'm not real sure why people keep sending me back, but they do. They must like it. But being mayor is not all about glamour. I talked to someone recently who said, when you are done, I think I'll run, and because you get to do so many cool things. I said, yeah, you do. But there's an awful lot of hard work. I think people forget, although we're a city manager form of government, the mayor is the face behind who has to get council to agree to things, who has to get all the information to the general public. But there is a lot of glamour. There's a lot of fun things, a lot of great things you get to do. I've met some incredible people, but there's a lot of hard work. On average, before COVID, I probably worked 12 to 14 hours a day, wow, 5 days a week, and nearly always worked on Saturdays and some Sundays. Now, Friday nights are date night. I take off and Tom and I go out with just us or friends or stay home. And Sunday is family time. We do church and then kids. But it is interesting, you're doing Womenworth meeting. I was one, and it was a room of about 100 people or less, maybe 80, and I was one of only 3 women in the room, and the others were not mayors. So it's not on, this probably surprises people more than anything. The large majority of this work is men oriented, just tradition.
So then it leads me to my next question, which is what prepared you best to do this job? Like you said, you keep getting sent back, so that means that the voters really believe in what you're doing, but what prepared you to be so good?
A little age, for one thing. Probably what prepared me best is my parents. I grew up in Fort Worth. My father had a business here. My mother was an involved community volunteer. And they always taught all 4 of us, you got to give something back to your community. It's always been about service. It's not about the money, heaven knows. The mayor just doesn't get paid anything. So It's never going to be about the money for me, and it shouldn't be for anybody. But it is about giving back and about the service. I'm known for being pretty upfront, pretty straightforward. My dad always said, just drive easy and whip light, meaning use your common sense and make great decisions.
If you could go back 10, 20 years, what would you tell yourself and how would you advise yourself for where you are today?
I've had that question before, and I never quite know how to answer it. I don't know that I particularly would change anything. I think the experiences that I had, being involved in the community, owning a business, being about giving back and volunteering, just having that can-do spirit, and you got to have a little moxie. You can't be afraid to tackle things. When I first took office, the first thing was to tackle the pension, and people said, "You'll never get that passed. You'll never pass this pension," and we did, not once but twice, and consequently had a lot of people who were irritated at us, but the second time they understood what it was all about, but it had to be done.
I'd love to hear you talk about any discrimination you might have faced over the time of your career and what that was like, but then maybe how did that propel you forward?
I'm 71 years old, and I've kind of always been involved in the business community at one level or another, the service community. And as a woman, it has almost always been I was the only woman. My business was in the auto business. My father was an auto dealer, and I had a title company and worked for about 54 of the car dealers. They were all men. There were no women. And so it wasn't unusual. And I just think there was always some discrimination, but either I was too stupid to know it or too hard-headed to care. I can remember one time when we first got out of college and I worked for Texas Employment Commission, and I was a supervisor, and I was pregnant with our first child, and I said to my supervisor, I worked the early morning shift, I went in at 5, and I said I'd like to shift over to the 8 o'clock shift because I'm just tired in the morning and about half sick, as most women will know. And he said, honey, you need to, patted me on the back and said, honey, you just need to go home and have that baby. You don't need to worry about work. And if you can't be here at 5, I said, trust me, I'll be here at 5 every morning. But that was not unusual for men to say those kind of things to you.
Very much so. In fact, if
And
you go back and
you're younger than me, but you've been through it.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
we've broken through a lot of that. And I think most women you just do go about your business and do it. My hope is that by the time my granddaughter and my daughter and granddaughter are in positions, that we won't be worrying about what color somebody is, whether they're male or female, that we'll just worry about who's the best candidate for the job.
I'm curious, how did you get started? How did you decide that you were going to enter into politics?
Gosh, I never intended to be in politics. I always wanted to give something back to the community. In fact, I went to school, have a degree in biology, and was going to be a veterinarian. Got accepted at A&M's law vet school, one of the first women classes with women in it, and decided to get married instead. Tom didn't want to go to A&M and spend 3 years while I was in school, and I guess that worked because 49 years later I've still got him. So it was probably a good decision. But I came back and I worked and started my own business, and I worked with the tax collector's office all the time, and it was the most inefficient business that ever was, and it drove me crazy. And I kept saying, somebody has to fix this. And finally, after I'd said that for a year, several of my clients sat down and said, somebody has to fix it, and that somebody needs to be you. Why don't you run for that office? And I hadn't even thought about running for political office. And so I went home and said to Tom and the kids, I'm thinking about this. And they said, go for it. Mm-hmm. And I did, and I won in a crowded field and made major changes to that office, and it became a model office, not just for the state, but nationwide. And then when Mayor Moncrief decided to retire, people came and said, you need to come to the city and do what you've done here in the tax office, straighten out the finances, do the pension, clean up some things that need to be done. I said, no, the mayor's office is a total different level. The tax assessor's is much more administrative. I went into this thinking, first term I'll serve and do what I set out to do, which was straighten up our finances at the city and get the city more user-friendly for the average citizen. And if I'm done then I'm done. And every time I've said, if I get beat, I get beat. It isn't meant to be. So I don't care about that. I care about giving back.
What's the hardest thing that this year has brought forward to you?
Well, clearly COVID-19 is the hardest thing. I mean, January and February, we were trucking along in the middle of the rodeo, brand new grand opening for Dickies. Yeah. Things were just going swimmingly, and all of a sudden in the early March, we're in the middle of a pandemic that no one had ever dealt with. There's no playbook for this pandemic. The biggest challenge was, how do you manage getting information that's constantly changing to your public? And we started doing Facebook Live every afternoon just to give the citizens some sense of information that they felt like they could trust. And I think we created a monster because we tried cutting it back to 3 days a week, and they hated us not being on. So we went back to every day, and then we went to 3 days a week, and now we're just 1 to 2 days a week because it is a little more stable. But I would say 2020 has definitely been a year of change and a year of challenge.
So I'm curious, out of that, anything that will stick around post-pandemic? So will the Facebook Live stick around, or anything that you found that the public has really wanted you to continue that you think will survive past the pandemic?
Yeah, I do think the Facebook Lives will stay. People really, we get thousands of viewers, and we get thousands of, copy overs and reviews, and people see it again. or whatever the correct term is. I think there's a lot that will stay. I think Zoom meetings, as much as we all hate them, they are very efficient. I think the hybrid of that, I just think there's an awful lot of good things that have come out of this. It's made people be more innovative and more creative, including the city.
Well, this is the last question, but I want to ask you, what do you feel is your responsibility as a woman leader within our community?
My responsibility as woman leader is the same as it would be for a man, and that's to set a good example and to listen to our residents and to try to sort out what the best thing to do for our residents is, to keep the city open and accessible to people, and to keep taxes low and deliver the best service that we can. It doesn't matter whether it's a man or a woman serving, you're all about the service.
Well, I can't tell you, Mayor, how great it has been to have this conversation with you today. Thank you so much for being here, and hopefully we'll be able to see each other more regularly out in the community here
I
real
hope so,
soon.
for sure, Leah. It's always fun to see you, and thank you for hosting me.
You bet. Thanks, Mayor. Have a good day.
You too.
Well, hello, everybody. It's great to see you. Thanks for being here today. We are honored to be here on behalf of Visit Fort Worth and their series, Women Worth Meeting, which all of you absolutely are. Looking forward to a fun discussion, and let's just jump into it. So I would love all of you to answer this question. Tell me a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your job. Kristen, we'll start with you.
Absolutely. I'm Kristen Jaworski, and I'm the trail boss for the Fort Worth Herd with Visit Fort Worth, and it's such a unique title. So I manage the twice daily Longhorn cattle drive in the historic Fort Worth stockyards. So we drive majestic, beautiful Longhorns twice daily at 11:30 and 4 o'clock down East Exchange Avenue.
Great. I can't wait to come back to you to find out what kind of training you need to get a job like that. So we'll
question.
come back to you on that. Jennifer, tell us a little bit about yourself and your job, please.
Okay, I'm Jennifer Haston. I'm with Global Source. I'm the Vice President. I oversee our housing and registration division, as well as I own a small AMC, Association Management Company.
Great. Welcome.
Thank you.
And then we'll go to Marianne. Marianne, tell us a little bit about yourself and your job.
Okay, I am Marianne Auld, and I am a lawyer at a firm, Kelly Hart & Home, and I'm also the firm's managing partner.
Great. Thank you. And Asa, tell us a little bit about yourself and about your job.
My name is Asa Aziz. I go by DJ Asa Ace. So my daytime, I am a respiratory therapist, and by night, I'm an international DJ.
Oh my goodness. Okay, lots of questions about that too.
Yeah.
So how about we go to Kristen and you tell us a little bit about either the training required or even just how you got into your role.
Obviously, I love tourism, and that's really my passion and my background. And we are a huge public relations tool for the city. So my background is in tourism, marketing, public relations, but most importantly, leadership. Because although we are driving cattle, it's managing personnel and safety and risk management and all of the things that you can only imagine that take place managing a 7-day-a-week program that represents everything that the city stands for.
Wow, amazing. And so Asa, I want to ask you, so you have your day job, but I'm really interested in what you do internationally. What steps did you take to do that, and what prepared you to say, this is what I'm setting out to do?
Lots of education, always educating myself. A lot of dedication, took passion to want to do it.
And how long have you been doing this?
I've been DJing for 4 years now.
4 years?
Yes.
And so have you grown your audience and your international appeal?
Yes, because I've started in Fort Worth. Fort Worth Black House was one of the first places I've started DJing. And so just me knowing people internationally and inviting me out, or just me going to visit and the opportunity arose that I was able to DJ. So it just lined up that way.
That's great. And so with COVID, how has that impacted your ability to?
A lot.
Yeah, I bet.
It impacted it a lot. It's just mostly able to sit back and reevaluate myself and educate myself even more on my craft and to decide like where I really want to go with it.
So last question for now anyway, but tell me, how has that impacted your ability to work with Visit Fort Worth?
Well, it's increased my impact so far.
If you went back 10 to 20 years, what would you tell yourself to do that you wish, that you would know today? So if you look back, what would you say? Marianne, how would you answer that?
I think I would tell myself not to stress out so much about every little step along the way. When you know where you're going, there's going to be value in whatever path you go, even if it means that you end up going down a road that you think, that's not where I really want to be with this. And so I think I would tell myself as a younger me to not be so hard on myself if I spent some time figuring out that I didn't want to do something as much as I did want to do something.
I want to talk about something that might be something that we talk about amongst ourselves, but not necessarily in mixed company, and that's just discrimination. Many of us are in very male-dominated roles, and we spend a lot of our days spent in environments that we might be the only woman or one of just a small handful. And I'm curious to hear a little bit about how you would say you encounter it, and whether it's subtle or overt, how you handle it. So Jennifer, how about I start with you?
Sure. I don't look for it. I think basically when you get offered a seat at the table, you assert yourself into it 110%. And I think that's key. I think, they're looking at it with no boundaries whatsoever. I just go in with blinders on, I would say.
Kristen, how about in your day-to-day, what's it like?
If we will just be human beings and look at each other without setting expectations, because so much of our expectations, that's what gets in our way. And so if we look at each other that way and treat each other with that respect, that really helps.
There are a smaller handful of female DJs, especially that are internationally renowned. What's that like for you?
I just observe it. I understand what's going on in the situation, and if I have time to educate the person on the discrimination at the time, then I try to take that time. And if not, sometimes I just walk away from the situation or just let it happen and just laugh at it later and know that in my mind what was happening and that it's not going to affect me in the long run. So.
Good deal. Marianne, you are one of the few, if only right now in our community, women leads of a law firm, a large law firm. And I'm curious, over the course of your career, or maybe even today, what's it like when you experience discrimination and how do you handle it?
I will tell you, I'm fortunate. When I got out of law school, I clerked for a judge who just did not distinguish at all based on whether a person was male or female. It was all about what you knew, what you brought to the table. And then I went straight to work for the Kelly and Kelly Hart and Hallman. And people assumed a lot because he was a white male of a certain age that he was going to have certain attitudes and all about working with women, and he did not at all. He gave me every opportunity, just like Judge Reevely. If you were man, woman, young, old, none of that made a difference to him. All he wanted was a group that was focused on getting the right result for the client. It won't surprise you that as a lawyer, I follow a lot of the wisdom from the trailblazer Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who would say, don't waste your time on emotions like anger and resentment. All they do is zap your energy and waste your time. So just keep going.
Jennifer, I'd love to hear from you, switching gears a little bit about your career and how did you get started?
Oh my. Criminology, honestly.
Wow.
I was set out to be a police officer, and due to nepotism, I'll keep that part short, they offered me a job at the Convention and Visitors Bureau in the small town of Texas that I was in. So the rest is history from there. So I laid the foundation at the Convention and Visitors Bureau into my hospitality career, and years later, was able to have my own business.
And here you are.
Here I am, yeah.
Yeah. Asa, tell me a little bit about how you got started.
So I got started out just really going out and seeing the passion that the DJ had and what they were able to do to the dance floor. So I reached out to a couple DJs and people close to me, and they were really down to help me learn the skill. They gave me the education, and then the passion just turned into my career after that.
That's the best way, right? So Marianne, did you start out saying, I want to be just a top lawyer, or did you have something else in mind altogether?
No, I don't know what I had really in mind. When I went to college, I was an English major and a history minor because that's what I really love to do. I love to read, I love to write. And so I thought I would probably be a teacher, and I was for a little while before I went to law school, just because all of my skill set kind of lined up with what is valued in the study of law. And then I wanted to be an appellate lawyer, which I was. I never saw the managing partner thing coming. I was a professor for a while at Baylor Law School. And so my life has kind of had a windy path, if you will. But I think all of those experiences ultimately lead you to where you are. And so for me, it wasn't that I saw this as the goal necessarily, but it all makes sense when I look back at it.
Kristen, so you shared a little bit about this before, but would you just give us some more information on how you got started?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, I don't believe there was a college course called Trail Boss. And so, when I had looked at that position, honestly, I wasn't sure. And I think that speaks to all of our character is we always want to pursue our dreams, and dreams take a lot of time to achieve. And so I had been on horseback my entire life, and I loved marketing, I loved tourism, like I mentioned, but really it was what Fort Worth stood for that drew me to this position. And I'm very driven by challenges, and first day on the job, I had plenty.
So let's stay on that theme of challenges. And what's been your biggest challenge this year, and how have you worked through it?
Because we still had obviously livestock to tend to, our program was not able to shut down. We may have had a reduced staff, reduced budget, just like everybody did, but we still had to maintain our operation. So that was definitely challenging. And then we all became, learning how to be a doctor and how to take temperatures and things that we weren't used to, just like all of us had those challenges. So learning to be proactive and looking for solutions more so than having a problem. And so learning to overcome those right away rather than reacting and really taking the emotion out of it. And I think the biggest challenge was realizing that in a leadership position, everybody needed a caretaker. Even the strong people in the organization or our stakeholders or people that we had relationships with all of a sudden needed a lot more of my attention.
That's amazing. Marianne, I'll ask you, tell me a little bit about the challenges you faced this year and how have you worked through them?
There's going to be a similarity, I'm going to guess, in some of our answers where, March 13th, I remember that day, and we just were told you're going to have to figure out another way to do this. People really need to be at home, sheltering in place. We had client business to take care of. Many of us had hearings and trials and things on our dockets. And so number one thing was getting our IT people, who were the real heroes to me of this whole year. Anyone who could figure out all of the different ways to get us working at home remotely, to get us meeting on Zoom, which we're all sick of. But if you think about what a remarkable tool that has been to keep us together and working on things. And so it's been the same thing where you just take one thing at a time and say, okay, today we're sending everyone home. This afternoon, we're going to figure out how we can keep people working and making sure that our client business is not just finished, but finished in the same way. We pride ourselves on the excellence of legal services. It has to continue even if we're doing it from the dining table instead of the desk in the office, right?
Oh, I tell you what, the unsung heroes of 2020 are any IT professional, right?
That's exactly
that
right.
has made it possible for us to keep doing our work.
That's exactly
So
it.
Asa, I'm curious about you, and you alluded to this a little bit earlier, just what challenges have you faced this year? Maybe what would you characterize as the greatest challenge, and how have you worked through it?
So the greatest challenge was I wanted to transition from my regular career life to my passion to make it a career. So I was trying to start a business to facilitate vibes and bring people together and just good times. And then COVID happened. So it was a challenge, but then it also taught me to take life one day at a time, just go with the flow because it can change like at any second. So you just have to be patient.
Mm-hmm. Jennifer, I'm sure that things are very different for you these days. Maybe you can share a little bit about the greatest challenge, if you can even order them or rank them that way and how you work through it.
I would say the greatest challenge for me is undoing everything I've done for the last 1.5 to 2 years, because it takes that long sometimes to do a contract with groups. And so for us, contracting is many years out. And when you sit in March 13th and you realize, okay, you know, it's like we've been through Ebola, we've been through 9/11, right? It was a thing of, okay, we can get through this, no problem. This is gonna take a few months, and then it keeps going and it keeps going, and you're unraveling and unraveling, and there was no end. So I think really that was a tough challenge, and for a lot of meeting planners out there today.
Asa, I'm curious on what kind of advice would you give, especially you've spoken about career versus passion. What kind of advice would you give to someone coming up as it relates to career versus passion?
I would say don't let like outside forces or your family give you the pressure to make a decision about a certain career path that they might feel that is right for you, and like take the time to find your passion and what really drives you, like what your heart is, what's calling your heart, and do the education on that and follow that.
Great advice. Marianne, I'll ask you the same thing.
I think that I would tell people to focus on your skill set. Honestly, at least in my field, end of the day, it is how you perform. Are you working hard? Are you developing the skill set that you need to be successful in whatever area of practice you're in? And so to get distracted by many of the other things around that in terms of, well, are there going to be women? Are there going to be, you know, what's it going to be like and all those things really kind of takes your focus away from where it needs to be.
So, Kristen, tell me, what do you say to someone that's coming up in their career? What kind of advice would you give them?
I would say that you are a woman worth meeting, and that no matter what situation that you're in, somebody is always looking up to you, and they're watching you and they're listening, and that we're all always on stage.
Wow, you guys are just killing me here. These pieces are amazing. Jennifer, tell me a little bit about what kind of advice you might share with someone.
I would say that keep learning. You never stop learning, and look ahead and stay ahead of the curve. That way, when you do have to adapt and change, you can do it.
I have one last question that I'm going to ask each of you, and so we'll start with Asa. Tell me, what do you feel is your responsibility just as a woman leader within your industry?
I feel my responsibility is to create a platform for ACE-level talent artists, create a home where they feel that they can be their creative, expressive self, like just love and not the pressure, just for it to flow freely.
Jennifer, I'll ask you the same thing. What do you feel is your responsibility?
I would say that we all are flawed, but don't let it define you. Perfectionism is not a requisite to life or your career. You know, it is for us though, the ability to lift others up and show them they can have their confidence in whatever skill set.
So these are hard to follow. It's very good. You know, as a leader in our industry, my responsibility is definitely to bring more people to Fort Worth, and I can only do that as a leader and inspire others to follow in my footsteps.
That's great. Marianne, close us out. Tell us, what do you feel is your responsibility as a leader, as a female leader within your industry?
For me, that my responsibility is to lead without regard to gender, but to demonstrate the very same qualities that we would hope in any leader. So, to be honest, to demonstrate integrity, to communicate well, to have resilience, all of those things that are the qualities that typify, and my goodness, we all struggle over our lives to continue to learn those things and to demonstrate those things, but to demonstrate them through what we do and not just what we say. I think that that's the responsibility that no matter the area, any leader needs to take on.
Let me just say thank you on behalf of Visit Fort Worth of proving why each one of you happens to be a woman worth meeting. And so thank you for your time, and I can't wait to do this again.
Thank you.